So you need an education.
Welcome, people. So here, this video, this commercial that someone put together, is going to teach me something. Whenever somebody tells me they're going to teach me something, I get nervous. and what every Republican should hear. So we're going to go through this video that he put together and see exactly what he's talking about. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute. So let's go ahead and we'll start piecing this apart and see if he's going to teach me something or not. And maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Maybe I won't understand everything he's telling me. But it's a very interesting video. So let's go on and see what else we can derive from this video from what every Republican should hear.
The microchip, the internet, GPS, touchscreens, space travel. Those are a few examples of world-changing technology that was created by our government or required massive financial support from our government. Now, I paid for that.
Oh, this is hilarious. He says the microchip, touchscreen TV, space travel, all that was made by government investments. Liar, your pants are on fire. This is where the Democrats lie to you and deceive you and completely lie to you. First off, the semiconductor and the microchip was invented by Texas Instruments, not the government, folks. Just like the Ford Motor Company invented the Ford motor car was done by Ford, not by the government, folks. But he'd have you think the touchscreen TV was invented by the government, that the NASA invented space travel. Sure, NASA put together the means to help build a spacecraft, but NASA, all the components of the spacecraft were built by NASA. Like the jet motors are built by somebody else. All the parts that go to the space motors and all the screws and all the sheet metal and all the stuff that comprise the rockets, the hydrogen, all that stuff comes from different corporations. And they're the ones that made the technologies to make us go to space and back, not NASA. NASA just was kind of a government conglomerate that had the right to, go to space and come back. And yes, they paid those corporations money to, for the fuel. And hey, will you build us a motor, for a spaceship? We want to do this. And then private company built the motor, so the rocket fuel or whatever it is they needed. But it wasn't built by the government. It was built by private companies. That's the difference between us and Russia. Oh, this guy's nauseating. There are some things the government does do. There are some things that the government does pay for and does do. But most of the stuff that the government does do in form of inventions and things like that is all made by private companies. That's the significance of the United States, that the private companies get money and build stuff. Some of that is done. Some R&D is done by the government giving it to people. Sure, that does happen, but it's far and few between. And no, they don't do huge investments. The only big huge investment was like the atomic bomb. That the government did put huge investments in. But most everything else that we have on our shelves is built by companies And even the atomic bomb, they had private companies building stuff for it, mining the ore and whatnot. And so this guy is claiming that his tax dollars paid for the microchip, which is false. And so he's claiming that his tax dollars went towards that. So he's claiming that that is free stuff that then was resold to the open public, which is incorrect, which is a lie. And they filed a patent. Texas Instruments filed a patent on it. Hello, McFly, where are you at? Yes, some universities and schools and things like that, I'm sure put some R&D into trying to make transistors and things like that. I'm sure they did do some of that out there. But the overall person who invented the transistor was Texas Instruments company, not the government, not a university. And most inventions don't come from universities; they come from the private sector. And if you go out there and start studying that, you would find that out. But this guy is so caught up that the government's the one that invents everything, and that's just absolutely false. And also, he wants you to think that because the government, that his taxpayer dollars help pay for it. Uh, the small amount of money he probably makes and taxes that he pays is probably so small that it probably doesn't even matter. I doubt he makes millions of dollars, and even if he did, it still would be a small amount, teeny little bit for the huge budget that NASA has anyway.
With a third of my money in the form of taxes. But I didn't get a return, because all our technology was just given away to private industries, and then it was sold back to us, so that someone else could profit. And that's what free stuff looks like.
Again, here's this claim again saying that the government makes everything and then sells it to private industry and it's resold to us. That's what he just said, right? He's a jerk off. It's a lie. Most things are made by private industry and sold to the government. That's how it works. And very few things are made in universities and then taken from a university out and sold to the public. It's done the other way around. R&D is done by big corporations, and they make stuff just like Texas Instruments. Like I said earlier about the microchip. Microchip was made by Texas Instrument, not by a university, by Texas Instrument, and by another semiconductor company, not by a university. So a university would go to Texas Instrument and say, "Here, Texas Instrument, here's the microchip we've invented. Here, go ahead and make it." And oh, hey, thanks. We'll make a company called Texas Instrument now, and thanks for the chip, and we'll make lots of money on it, and we'll do a patent on it. No, that's not how it worked. Texas Instrument invented the microchip, figured out how to do it, and then sold it to everybody. And most microchips can be all traced back to Texas Instrument. Okay, that is not government free stuff, moron. And so this guy would like you to believe that everything's created by the government. It's just not true. And he wants you to think that the government invested huge amounts of money to create all this stuff. And that's just not true either. Not in the United States. Elsewhere, in Russia or China or other kind of countries or communist, totalitarian type governments, they do that there because the government owns everything. Here, we don't own everything. It's the companies that own everything, and they're the ones that make and R&D and do all that stuff. And yes, the government does invest some monies into R&D and some things for certain things. But overall, it's the companies that make our warships. Even our warships are all made by other companies and put together. Even our tanks and all that, all the technology goes into our tanks. Although they're assembled by a government company, All the technology that goes into it comes from other companies. This guy is a lunatic, and it's not free stuff. They sell it to make money. That's how corporations make their money, is to sell it to us, and they make money, and that's how they grow.
Am I supposed to pay money to breathe?
What kind of stupid question is that? Do you have to pay money to breathe? If you do want to have oxygen and an oxygen tank, yes, you do have to pay for it. The companies do. They go out and make pure oxygen or a machine that makes oxygen. And yeah, you got to pay for it, just like everything else. And yeah, people make money at it. Maybe you should try it to make some money yourself.
Or have access to water?
Yes, access to water. Some places charge for that now. Cities are charging for it because they have to clean the water, filter it, and it costs money to do that. And so to make the water more pure so you can drink it. And so it costs money, so they want to recoup that. Yes, they charge for it. And some cities don't. And my city I am at does charge for water and meter the water. I don't like metering water myself. I wish they wouldn't do that, but that's the way it goes.
Or community?
Paying for being part of the community, I don't know what that's about, but yes, you buy a house and get a job and you pay your dues, just like everybody.
Or civilization?
I'm not sure what you mean by civilization, but you can certainly move anywhere you want to around the world. You don't have to live in the United States. You don't like it here, pack up your ass and leave. You can move to Russia, China, or any other country.
Or is that my natural right, being born on the planet?
You have certain rights, inalienable rights, if you're born in the United States. If you're born in other countries, you get the rights that are given to you. And that's why this country is so great, because you get a lot more rights here being born into the United States. And you get less rights being born elsewhere. If you don't believe me, move. Go to some other countries and see what you get. And you'll find out very quickly.
Because that's what economic rights.
What economic rights? You're just born with certain inalienable rights. It's up to you to create your own wealth by going out and it's called work.
They mean I have a right to participate in the economy.
Depends on where you're born. If you're born in China, China may not say you can't participate in the economy. It depends where you're born and that kind of thing. In the United States, you're born with certain rights, and yeah, you can. In the United States, there's nothing holding you back from going out and getting a job or starting your own business. Only you, your two little hands.
Without having to be born into the Trump family.
Most wealth, like the Trump family, is inherited. Okay, billionaires and people who have billions and billions of dollars, most wealth in the United States is inherited. So get that through your thick skull. Most money is inherited, okay? The second thing is insurance. Very few people make money on their own. I've made my money on my own. I've gone out and pounded the payment and made my own money. Unlike Trump where he inherited it. Problem with you is you just don't know how to make money. You just don't know how to go out there, and no one's taught you how to make money. They never taught you. They don't teach it in schools. They don't teach you how to go out there and do it. And even the teachers don't know how to make money, or they wouldn't be teachers. So, and even professors don't know how to make money. That's why they're a professor. So they don't know how.
Or some other social predator's bloodline.
I don't know what you mean by predator's bloodline, being smirky, I guess. Being a smart ass. Excuse me. But You don't have to be somebody's bloodline in the United States to make money. You can marry into it, I guess, but you can make a living and make a good life if you go out and do certain things. But you have to make right choices and do the right thing. And
Now I'm going to teach you another word, democracy.
so far, you haven't taught me much, but a few lies. And I don't think you're going to teach me about democracy. So, what's your definition of democracy? I'd sure like to know what that is. You didn't add that in the video. Democracy, a definition of it is a government by the people, especially the rule of majority. A government in which the supreme power is invested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. Okay, now we want to talk about representation. And our government is a representation government. And a lot of the Democrats seem to want a government that's not a representation government. It seems like that's what they advocate. They want mob rule because they want to get rid of the electrical electoral college, and that college stops from being a mob rule type government because the small states get to pick the president, big states get to have more representative in the to making the laws, and so it balances out the power. And so, but the Democrats want to do away with electrical college and have mob rule, which we are not about. We're about representation of government and try to get everybody a fair shake at being part of the government. That's why we have the college. And the Democrats want to get rid of it because they want to have mob rule. And that's not what the United States Constitution was made by or for. And we don't want to have mob rule. And the reason why we have that leaders or representatives go into Congress is because our founding fathers felt we needed to have people who could study the law, study and contemplate the ramifications of what they're doing when they make laws and things, so they can study and read and learn. And they didn't feel like the general public would be able to understand the laws and everything good enough to make an educated decision on what those laws mean or can do, and things like that. And I agree with that firmly. So they have to have full-time or part-time legislatures who can go in there and read everything and hire lawyers and do all the things they need to do to understand the laws that they're creating. And that's why we hire them. They're called representatives. And that's why we have House representatives and we have a Senate representatives. And that's why we have them. And not mob rule. That's why they try to get away from mob rule, is because of past history of mob rule and how terrible it was and how it could turn into a tyrannical government. If the general public could vote themselves a paycheck and vote themselves money out of the treasury, they certainly would. And so that's why we have representatives, so that won't happen, and that we don't just give ourselves whatever we want out of the treasury. If we did, we would definitely be broke.
Now, want to be mobs?
You are a mobster if you sit down and have everybody do a crowdsourced vote where every person votes and there are no representatives. You don't need representative government if you have mob rule where everybody just votes. What do you need a legislature for then?
They love saying the government's bad at everything.
You just contradict yourself. You just said the government makes everything, which is everything that we have, and that R&D, money put into the government, that the government spends in R&D, makes everything we have, and they give it all away, and it's sold to us, everything we have. So that must be pretty good, everything we have. But now you're saying that the government isn't always all that bad. You contradict yourself.
When a government's ruled by the people, it's called our voice.
When it's ruled by the people, it's not called your voice. It's called mob rule. Mob rule. That's what it's called. It's not called representative government anymore. Why do you need a legislature, a Senate, and a House of Representatives? Why do you need all that? Why would you even need a president of the United States even? You wouldn't even need that. All you need is to have everybody vote on everything, and then have everybody just have a national vote on everything there is, and that's it. That's called mob rule, not a constitutional government, and not a government of the people, for the people, by the people, and a representative government, which we have now. That's just all mob rule. That's what you want. And that's not what our Constitution is. That's not our representative government. And that's not what our founding fathers created. And that's not what we want as a government. Maybe that's what you want as a government. Maybe you need to move to China, because that's a communist government. Communist governments have where everybody can vote like that, or Russia, everybody can vote on what they want, move to one of those countries or a European country. Everybody can vote, massive votes like that, and vote on everything that the heart desires. And they are crappy countries because of it, because everybody can vote on everything. We, the people, hire representatives to representatives because our founding fathers knew that not everybody's going to be educated enough to understand all the rules and regulations thoroughly enough, and that's why we need to have representative government, and we vote for them. They go in and dig into all that kind of stuff for us to help us out. They have to be full-time people, like lawyers, and no way everybody's going to understand that. And the will of the people, a mob rule, can be influenced by emotion one way or another sometimes, to vote for something or not to vote for something by emotion, and not by practicality, by oh, hey, yeah, we want to have cheaper insurance, and let's figure it out. But they can be swayed on motion, and that's something that's huge. And that is what happened in the past by past governments. That's why we created the government we have now, is so that people will calm down and come to their senses by having representative government. That's what we have.
So it's not bad.
Mob rule can be purely evil if you go read history. And when mob rule was employed back in the day, where the king's heads were chopped off, and another leader was put in power, people died by the masses because of mob rule, and it was extremely deadly and pure evil. You don't know what you're talking about. Study history, man.
And you're not going to silence our voice.
I don't think anybody's trying to silence your voice at all. I think we're all just trying to talk some sense into your voice, because what you're talking about is a totally different kind of government than we have today, and you're trying to change our government into something it's not. And so that's upsetting people that live here under our current system. If you don't want to live in our current system, you can always get your ass and pick it up and go to another country where they have those such systems currently today, working today, where mob rule rules. But see, you won't get up and have the balls to get up and move to another country that has mob rule, because you know that mob rule doesn't work. But you want it to work. You think that by doing it again here and doing it differently somehow, that it will work some way. Well, it's never worked. It's never worked well in history. It never works. That's why we formed the government we have now, and we want to keep our government. And that's why people argue with you and fight with you, because they know that it's not going to work, and they know that it's going to be very evil eventually, and a lot of people are going to end up dead because of it. And so that's why people argue with you. But no one's stopping your voice. No one's stopping you from speaking out. If you were in another country like China, they'd probably cut your head off or shoot you in the head. We don't do stuff like that here in America, as you well know.
And whether it's the oil
What does the oil industry have to do with anything? They just supply oil, and they just want to supply their oil to us, and all of us want gas in our car. We want cheap oil, we want fuel, we want heat in our homes, and we don't want, and that's what we want to have. And until something better is invented that can give us that, that's what we want. And solar panels and batteries and things like that, it's not going to be enough power to keep us warm in the winter and to take care of us. And everybody knows that. But for some reason, the liberals and other scientists and other people think that they can provide that. So far, we have not seen that in the marketplace. We've not seen that anywhere where it's happening to such an extent where people can be off the grid and provide enough heat for people during the snowy times and the snowy seasons, and take care of their needs. It doesn't work. Oil and gas and these kinds of fuels take care of our needs, get the shipping that we need, get the food we need, get the products we need and want, and until you can come up with something that can replace that in a way to where it's cost effective and cheaper and doesn't pollute the environment, I'm sorry, guy, it's just ain't gonna fly.
industry or the criminal justice system.
I'm not sure what you're talking about here, criminal justice system. I think we have one of the better criminal justice systems in the world. It always can be tweaked. There's always something we can do better, I'm sure. But just coming out and tweaking the system and let everybody out on a technicality is not making the system better. We need to sit down and put people in jail that are criminals and not let them out. And that seems to be the Democrats' solution. And some of the Republican solution is just to let criminals out, let them reoffend. And that's not why they're in jail. They're in jail because they can't control themselves. And that's why we put them in jail. And so I don't know what you mean by criminal justice system other than that.
Or the International Monetary Fund.
I don't know what you mean by the International Monetary Fund. It's just a quasi-government, privately owned bank that goes out and makes money on its own. It has a chairperson who's a government official, and then the rest of the people are investors into it. I don't know if you know that, but the monetary fund, the people that are involved in it have private investors in it. And just like you could go invest into it if you wanted to and become rich, but you're too lazy to do that. So I don't know what you mean by that monetary fund. We have to have some kind of money to do transactions around the world. If it's not the monetary fund, it would be something else. And I think no matter what we put out there, you're just going to complain about it. Nothing's perfect, right? But I'm sure we can do improvements on it. But like I said before, we have to have a banking system that can work worldwide.
Under Facebook.
What's wrong with Facebook now? I have no idea. What, the Dems now hate Facebook? That's a new one on me.
Or Congress.
What about Congress? Are you just blurting out these words just for fun? I don't know. Sounds like it to me.
Or the presidency.
What about the presidency? People get elected in the presidency, and so what?
If any organization becomes oppressive,
You have no idea what oppression is. Go to China and go to some of these other countries, North Korea, and see what true oppression is, and give me a call. You're not oppressed. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is a good one, accountability in government. If you put people who are morally qualified and people who have morals and have good judgment. Our founding fathers talked about this all the time. If you put people with good judgment and good morals and who are really concerned about the people of the United States first, putting them first, and putting our welfare first, and things like that, you will find that they make better decisions. They're not perfect. They could still make some mistakes, but overall, they're going to make better decisions for the people of the United States. And but if you put somebody in office who has no moral compass, who will murder the babies when they're first born, who will go out and don't care about the homeless, and who don't care about whether there's people starving people in the United States, or we could go on and on about all the kind of things that are bad we see. Um, if we put people who don't have a good judgment in office, who are not moral, who are not, who don't have those kind of aptitudes, and I keep saying moral and keep going back to it, but there's other kinds of judgment characteristics. Won't abuse people, and let the police abuse people and things like that. If you don't put somebody in office who can't kind of control that kind of, they see a bad cop doing something bad and then say, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. That kind of person. Instead, they just let the cops do it. In fact, they tell the cops to do it more. you know, like President Bush did something, stop and frisk. I think it was one of his things. I think it was President Bush that did that. Maybe Obama. But they didn't just stop and frisk. They stop and beat people. And so it got out of hand. And um, but they could have done something else that might have been better than stopping and frisking people. That maybe there would have been some other kind of something else that would have been better instead of harassing the general public. And that made a big sentiment. Now people hate the police. That's what it ended up doing. So you got to put leaders in office who are moral, who are believe in themselves, who believe in loving, that have love for the people of the United States, have love for homeless people, have love for all people, love life in general, and those kinds of things, and a lot of other kinds of love the Ten Commandments, maybe. We don't want to murder people. If you have someone who will let murderers out, out of jail left and right, then that's not a very moral person. Those murders are going to go out and probably murder more people and back up in jail again, and harm more innocent Americans, for example. And so you have to find people who have good moral judgment that can that would, no, I wouldn't let those murderers back out of jail. Now if somebody came up that they didn't, was proven they didn't murder somebody, then of course we get those people out of jail. But I'm talking about real true murderers that really did do the crime. I'm talking about those kind of people. And so you have to find people with moral judgment. If you find people without moral judgment, without a compass, without any kind of that kind of thing going on, then they're not going to have good judgment. They're going to make bad judgments, and they're going to end up harming the American public, including you.
unaccountable, that's tyranny.
What's tyranny? I'm not sure I follow you. What, bad moral judgment in government? Or people not being accountable in government? If you have moral judgment, you don't need to be accountable for anything because you don't do things wrong or illegal.
And when we make them accountable, that's democracy.
Making them accountable becomes a police state. When you sit down and start making people become accountable, how do you do that? Do you put a microphone up their ass? So if you give good moral judgment, principled people in office, then they're not going to do bad things because they're principled and they're moral and they have good judgment. But if you put people in office that don't have those things, then you end up with a police state. And so that's what you're talking about. So you're talking about that you have to go, you hunt them down and arrest them and make them accountable and put them in jail and have police everywhere and all kinds of police to watch them and then try to catch them doing the bad things they do. And that's a police state at that point, and that's totalitarian government. That's what you're suggesting. And that's not what our framers wanted. Our framers knew this people would get away with crimes. You get away with crimes every day. Don't you ever jaywalk? I bet you jaywalk every day, walking across the street and things like that. Our founders knew that we would do things wrong and that we'd violate some laws. And they didn't want to incarcerate everybody. They wanted to allow people to have what's called freedom to walk across that street, not have so many laws that bog you down where you can't do things. That's not what the United States is about. That's not what, excuse me, that's not what our founding fathers wanted. They wanted you to have freedom to choose to be able to walk across that street, be able to, go do whatever you want to do without, as long as it didn't interfere with other people's rights. And not have the police hound you and watch you and follow you around and all that kind of stuff. That's not what our republic is about, and that's not what our government should be about. Because we're not a police state. We don't want to make so many rules that you just go outside to pick up a newspaper or turn your water on the wrong time to water your lawn, you're in jail. That is a police state. And the same thing with the government. We should have moral leaders with, like I said earlier, with good principles, so we don't have to hunt them down. We don't have to put mics and picks and bugs and all those kinds of things and listen to phone conversations, try to catch them doing something evil or wrong, because we put people who have good judgment and good moral character into office. That's why we put people like that in office, so that they make the right decisions or the best decisions they can be made, rather than people who don't have such character.
Now, Republican leadership today, they're against democracy.
I'm a classical Republican, so excuse me. And I've never heard the Republican leadership ever say they're against democracy. They're against mob rule. So I know that. They're against changing the Constitution. They're against getting rid of the Constitution. And they're against, that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'd have to see Mitch McConnell or any of these guys come out and say, I'm against democracy, because I don't believe that. They're against mob rule. That's what they're against.
And they're not even trying to hide it.
Proof is in the pudding, my friend. So I don't see in your video any proof that Mitch McConnell or any of the Republicans said they're not wanting a democracy. All I've ever heard them talk about is they don't want mob rule. That's for sure.
They're only in power because of an undemocratic electoral college that was created by slaveholders.
See, this is where we get into more lies and an uneducated fool who doesn't know history, who doesn't study, who didn't go to school and study history, and doesn't know anything about the Constitution, doesn't know anything about George Washington, doesn't know nothing about our constitutional leaders like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin didn't have slaves. Hello! Oh, wait a minute. One of the founding fathers didn't have slaves. Oh, how can it be? And so he's a farmer and he's not a slaveholder. And wait a minute. That doesn't go with his narrative that he just mentioned. He just said that there were white farmers, slaveholders. Benjamin Franklin is a farmer, but not a slaveholder. Wait a minute. That can't be right. Hold on here. And there were others that were not slaveholders as well that signed the Constitution. And so, wow. And now let's talk about George Washington. Wait, George Washington's got to be a slaveholder. Wait a minute. It's his brother's farm. His brother owned the farm and had the slaves on it. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I bet you didn't know that either. See, because he didn't read history. He has his own thing in his head. His little swirly brain has in his head about George Washington and about all that because he didn't go study history. And the history was George Washington's brother, half brother actually, owned the farm, had the slaves, and then he died. And then George Washington inherited the farm with the slaves on it. And eventually, George Washington gave all the slaves their freedom. What? What? The terrible white man slave guy gave all the blacks freedom on George Washington's farm. How dare he? I thought he's a slaveholder. I thought he was a terrible slave man. Whip those blacks. Whip those blacks. Wait a minute. What? What? He's not a farmer either. He wasn't. He wasn't. He did. But he made flour though, right? Okay, so he made flour, but he also did metalworks, and he made chocolate. He made chocolate. He made metalworks, tin works. Made lots of tin works. He made tractor parts. What? Well, not for tractors like we think. He made these things that you pull behind oxen, and they till the ground. And so he made those and a bunch of stuff like that. And so he wasn't just a farmer, and he is a fisherman. Oh, George Washington was a fisherman and sold fish. Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me! So he's a fisherman, not just a farmer. But I thought he was just a farmer. He's just a white man farmer. No. He sold fish. He sold lots and lots of fish that he fished and sold it, to England. And flour, ground flour, by the way, the best milled flour around, made a water mill with running water as the mechanism for energy to run the mill instead of animals. He used running water. So he used, wow, he's an environmentalist. George Washington's an environmentalist. He used running water to run a mill instead of animals. Isn't that something? Unreal. I can't believe it, and they don't even like him. And so he wasn't a white man with just a farm. So he's not just a farmer. He also did whiskey. What? He sold whiskey and raised up whiskey too, and made whiskey and sold that. Yep, that's right, whiskey and other things. That wasn't just all that he sold on his farm. I guess he did a lot of other kinds of things that they did, like cabinetry, furniture, all kinds of things. Oh, so he was not just a farmer. He was an industrialist. That's right. He built things. Oh, I see. So he was not a farmer, really, by the label. And so this guy here is a liar. Then that's right. This guy's a liar. Call him a farmer, but he's not really a farmer. And a lot of the other guys that are part of signing our Constitution weren't also farmers either. They did more than just farming. Oh, really? No kidding. I didn't know that. Yeah, because you're an idiot. Oh. Yes, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know history. He doesn't know. And then he says that it was an unconstitutional thing about the electoral college. And so he doesn't even know why they made the electoral college. The reason they made the college, again, redo this, they made the college because the small states would be trampled on by the big states. So they made the college so they get to pick the president, while the big states get to make the rules, the laws. And so that way it would be a balance of power. Do you even understand that? I mean, I know the Democrats talk about checks and balances all day long and brag about that all day long. Well, it's called a balance of power. And so they gave the small states the ability, the small places of population, the ability to pick the president of the United States, and he has veto power to balance out the people that had lots of population, and because they get to pick all the representatives, because it goes by population. The more population you have, more representatives you have, and so and they're going to have more representatives than the small states and the small population areas. So they get to pick the president. So it balances out. It balances itself out. And there's some other reasons too, but we won't get into those right now. So this guy is a liar, and he just lied to you right now again here in this broadcast about George Washington being a farmer when he's not, and that it was an unconstitutional thing done by white guys, which is not true, or undemocratic, I guess, which is not true. And there you go.
They're only in power right now because we have an undemocratic institution called the Senate that gives a
I notice he doesn't tell you how it's undemocratic. He doesn't tell you how it's undemocratic for the House. He skips the House. He doesn't say the House is undemocratic, but the Senate's undemocratic. What? He doesn't want to have a Senate. He just wants to have a House. He doesn't want to have, and he wants to have mob rule. And so we're back to now changing the Constitution again. And so here he is, telling you, I want to get rid of the Senate. I want to get rid of the electoral college. And I want to have mob rule. And I want to have everybody just vote for the president, I guess. And that it was unconstitutional, maybe even, probably. And here you go. This is a Democrat. This is an American saying how they want to destroy our Constitution of the United States of America. This is the type of person who should not be living in the United States at all. I mean, I would rather have a Mexican come here who loves the Constitution, reads up on the Constitution, and loves our Constitution, and supports our Constitution, and willing to die for our Constitution, and have him come here and live here, and have this fool go live in Mexico. That's what I would rather have, honest, truthfully. And George Washington, just so you know, used to round up the Tories. And if you don't know what a Tory is, you maybe need to read up a little bit on that. But a Tory, he used to round them up and seize their property and kick them out of the United States. And they were American citizens. So they were born here. So I think we need to do that again. Go back to rounding up Tories like this kind of guy here and others like him, since he doesn't like the United States Constitution of the United States and he doesn't like our country. Maybe it's time for some of these people to leave and go to other countries, and we'll just help them along with their journey of living in Mexico or Guatemala or somewhere else. They would be much more happy living there because they won't have to worry about they can have mob rule down there.
Single resident of Wyoming has much voting power as 68 people in California. Because every state gets 2 senators, doesn't matter how many people live in them. And Republicans love that. They love how millions more Americans vote for Democrats but don't get any representation. Because they love free stuff, just like the Founding Fathers. Well, guess what? Slavery's over. States are not people. Corporations are not people. Concentrated power and wealth and a master race and master culture, none of that is democracy. And your sacred Constitution is long overdue for a rewrite, as holy of a document as...
When you start a corporation, it's like it's its own identity, its own person. And yes, it can get its own credit cards, it can get its own credit, its own banking, and it can buy things, it can buy property, it can do whatever it wants. It is like a real person as far as financial realm is concerned. And you don't have to use your own personal credit or your own personal monies. And if a corporation goes broke, it doesn't affect you personally if you do it right. So that's what they mean by that, moron. And so here he is confessing to you right there that he wants to rewrite our Constitution, our sacred Constitution, has held it up for over, several hundred years, actually longer than that, over 300 years our Constitution has been around, or longer than that. Pieces of it's been around for a long, long time, and has been proven over time to work. That's why we have our Constitution. And this moron here wants to overthrow our government, overthrow our constitutional rights. And just like, we heard from Elizabeth Warren saying she wants to get rid of the Electoral College, she wants to do more than that. And she wants to have mob rule. These kind of evil people are out there. We need to round them up, kick them out of the United States, and because they're Tories, they're no longer real Americans anymore. There are terrorist Americans. I don't even call them Americans anymore. They're just terrorists. They're just straight out not Americans anymore. I don't know what to call them. But and they just need to be rounded up and kicked out of the United States, and they can go live somewhere else because they obviously don't like our Constitution, they don't like our government, and they don't like living here. So they should leave, and we should help them along with that. You can hear the animosity and the angst this guy has for our Constitution, and about in corporations. He said, aren't people. I guess he doesn't understand corporate law. That's how stupid this guy is. He doesn't understand. When you start a corporation, you are given a special number. It's like a Social Security number. And a corporation is treated like a person. Don't you understand that, moron? And so when you start a corporation, it becomes like a living person, and it can get its own money that way. It can go out and get its own credit cards. People don't understand that. So when you start a corporation,
you've been thinking it is, conditionally, of course. Because even the empire-hungry colonists would have been disgusted by your handing over everything, sir, yes, sir, to the lords and ladies of big box stores, oil, and money that Republicans are worshiping today.
I like how you can tell me what the people in the past would think. You can read their minds in the grave. Oh, I can tell you what the people in the past would think. You know what I think? They would love our box stores today. They go to Home Depot and love it. And George Washington, like I said, wasn't a farmer. He was an industrialist. He made lots of other products besides farming stuff. Like he did fishing, he did metalworks, tin works, chocolate, other stuff. Duh! You're an idiot.
The American dream made us famous all over the world. We gave people hope. But Republicans love it so much more now that people have the worst chance at making it here than any other rich nation. They prefer the class system, the caste system, extreme inequality, and poverty. Because keeping other people down, the communist, the Mexican, the scary pronoun, whatever word they want to give them, it makes them feel superior, like the old days, scared and demonizing whatever's out in the woods, outside of the colony. It doesn't matter that their lives aren't much better. They're living through the achievements of their gods, icons of money, power, cruelty, and dripping arrogance. And that's why they love a fabric flag more than the human flesh and blood that live and die under it, because they're idol worshippers.
You can see here how delusional this guy is about how people feel about the flag and stuff like that, that we're idol worshippers because we love our flag of what it represents. And how does he know what I think about dead people in a grave? What an idiot.
And that is exactly what Jesus and Muhammad and Moses told you not to do. How dare you invoke the name of the Almighty and his messengers against the weak, the meek, and the poor?
How dare you tell me how to worship my God and how I should worship? It's called freedom of religion. So that's another thing here. Democrats want to tell you how you should how you should worship, who you should worship, and their idols, gay people. So they want you to worship gay people and dead babies, and then they're telling you how to worship. You know, they murder babies all the time in abortion, but somehow they tell you that they have the moral standing and that they have the moral rights. That they're the ones they're the moral people. My goodness, what a sick fuck! You know, what a sick piece of shit this guy is. They go out and murder little babies right after they're born and probably strangle them to death. That's just going, wah, 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 die, you little baby, die, you little baby. That's what the Democrats do. That's what this evil piece of shit does. And he thinks that's somehow morally right to murder little babies all the time. And then somehow he has the moral high ground to tell us how we should worship and how we should treat people. And what do we do? A lot of the poor people, they need to get off the lazy ass and go to work. That's what they need to do. And quit getting free handouts. That's what they need to do. And if they don't want to do that, they can live in a tent, I guess.
And you can stand by while all our communications networks get drowned with some Russian psychological warfare. You can redraw all our maps with a Sharpie. You can keep suppressing the voting rights of our Black, Brown, and First Nation brothers and sisters. And go ahead. Keep using the old slave laws to false multiply your votes. Keep tricking all your scared, angry, ignorant old white people into supplication before your orange golden calf, but we're going to beat you. We're going to replace you, and we're going to change the culture. If not this election, then out in the streets. Because you cannot have this land. You cannot have this country. It was never yours in the first place.
Hey, how much did you make off your baby parts selling? Did you make enough to pay your mortgage? Anyways, I want to make one comment. This land is our land, not your land. And our Constitution is our Constitution. And it's going to stay here over our dead bodies. That's number one. You can keep trying to bring people in here from other countries all you want, but they're going to obey our laws, and they're going to obey the Constitution, or we're going to kick them out. That's just what's going to happen. That's number one. Number two, number two, big mouths like you, eventually, I hope, we can throw you out of our country. Round you up and throw you out of the country. Not put you in jail, but throw you out. That's what I hope happens. Secondly, the land in America, the land here was not the Indians' land. If you go study history, which you don't know how to do because obviously you can't read, the history of the land wasn't the Indians' land anymore because England, Dutch, French, Spain, all those kind of people and more, Mexico, all of them claimed the land. The Indians didn't own their lands anymore when the United States was invented. The United States had to buy the land from those other countries in order to get the land back. Then, out of the kindness of our own hearts, we gave the Indian some of their land back, okay, as a deal. And even then, the Indians disrespect us even after that. So we made a deal with the Indians to give some of their land back. That's a pretty good deal. So you can see how the Democrats, people like this guy, lie to you and deceive you. Like, you know, about the land with the Indians owning it when they didn't own it because the land was taken over by the British in the beginning. Remember, this was a Britain colony. And it wasn't America back then. And the British took over the land and they owned it. And it was taken over. And then eventually people began to feel like they were Americans and raised up against the British, and then they took over the small colony area, okay, which most Indians didn't live in, and they just kind of stayed in the colony area. The land around outside the colonies was still owned by other nations, nothing to do with the colonies. And then the colonies started buying that land from those other nations that claimed the land. And they had it under with guns. They had guns and said, "This is our land." And so you had to buy it, and so they bought it with the Indians on it. That's what they did. And then eventually, when the United States bought bigger pieces of land, they gave the land back to the Indians, and eventually the Indians got a lot of their, big chunk of land. Also, the Indians sold their land that was given to them. That's another thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that even though we gave them some of their land back, they sold it. You can go back and look at some of the old newspapers, and you will see land for sale by Indians, and the Indians sold their land. So they were given land and they sold it, and then we gave them more land and they sold it. We gave them more land, and even to this day, the Indians still sell some of their land, and so that's not my fault, is it? Is that my fault? No, I don't think so. And so that's the true story, not this other nonsense story that we stole the land from the Indians. The story is that the Indian land was already taken over by other countries, already claimed by other countries. If the United States never grew bigger than it did, that land would be owned by Mexico and other places, and the Indians would have had it contended with them, which they slaughtered them by the hundreds. So I don't think the Indians have really a big beef to talk about, because we gave some of their land back, but we had to recoup our money back, and it was kind of a deal. Hey, we're buying this land, and we're going to do you a deal. You get to keep some of the land, and we own all of it, and we'll do a deal with you. Or you're going to be living in Mexico. And a lot of the Indians agreed that to do just that, allow us to buy the land from Mexico, and so they can live on it under the United States rule. And so that's what it's all about. But this guy's deceptive, letting you know that that we stole the land from the Indians, and that is false, a lie, deception. That's what the Democrats are about. All this whole taping that we just went through is lie and deception. And there's more stuff here that I could go into, but I just had a headache after I got to this part of the tape, and I decided to skip some of it and get to the end and finish this off. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed my commentary. Let me know what you think. Share, the bell, and comment. Thank you much. Have a great day.